Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hardfire Media Liberal Conversations. Today's conversation is part of a series we're doing during this time of unprecedented state exercise of power in certain places since the national emergency was declared in March 2020. The idea for this series comes from classical liberalism, which is based on free speech, freedom of religion, equal rights under law, and a robust private sphere. My name is Cameron Weber. I'm an historian and economist and the producer of Hardfire Media and today's host. We note that we are more than 20 months into an emergency, which gives a lot of power to those in power, into an emergency which is supposed to last 3 weeks while we all get herd immunity to flatten the curve. The state never lets a good crisis go to waste. It remains to be seen to what extent we will recover our freedoms of movement and association. For example, the governor of California has extended his COVID emergency powers until March 2022, 2 years. Here in New York City, vax passports are required to enter certain private locations, the first of its kind in the United States, and other jurisdictions have followed. And recently we've got the exciting news that now private businesses in New York City have to get the vax passport. But we'll hopefully, and there's about 200,000 private businesses in New York City that have to succumb. Today we are discussing 20 years of the USA Patriot Act, which was passed after another emergency, 9/11. John's got his Statue of Liberty there. We are interested in how the federal state is ever increasing its police powers and how this is affecting our personal and economic privacies and rights. Let's look at our civil liberties. Thanks to John Clifton's recommendation, we will also discuss how we might start to disentangle this state power growth domestically under the guise of national security. Now I would like our guests to identify themselves, say hello to our viewers, and say why you are interested in talking about this topic. Why don't we start with Marcy, who was the first to log on. Hello,
Okay.
Marcy.
Hi. Okay, my name is Marcy Berry, and I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm just a grandmother and a business owner. And what I do is I'm interested in these programs. I'm interested in my website. I'm interested in politics because we have to live with what we put out. I mean, we're the voters, we're the people that decide. And yet we are abdicating those responsibilities. So I do what I can, not much, but I do what I can. And this is why I'm in this program. This is why I'm interested in this particular subject.
Right. And then John, I would have to say that this program probably owes most to John Clifton, who's been on the show quite a bit talking about national security issues. We did one on the Afghan fiasco not too long ago. John, welcome.
Welcome, peace and freedom. Grace be with you. I have had problems with the Patriot Act since the day of 9/11. I've had problems with it longer than I've had problems with 9/11 in terms of some of the details about whether that was legitimately an act of terror or done by corrupt parties in our country in order to enact such things as the Patriot Act.
Speaking of Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, it's a different debate about that matter. But what is a fact is that the outline of what the Patriot Act was already pre-written or drafted years before it was voted on. It just needed the appropriate emergency in order for some politicians to rush it to Congress to get a vote. And it, in a wholesale blanket fashion, with lots of different penumbras and subsections and whatever, it is structurally designed to evaporate rights and to create a lack of public accountability for the actions of the government in seeking information on people under the guise of fighting terror. It's helpful that over the years, people have become a little bit wiser to the issue of of that whole war on terror being a subtext or a pretext for an enlargement of government power, and hope this kind of conversation can help bear out why that is the case.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, John. And then last but not least, Erik Frankel. Erik ran for city council to represent the neighborhood I live in here in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, and now and did quite well, got 20% of the vote, and now is seeking to run for Congress, U.S. Congress. Correct, Erik?
Correct. Thank you. I guess you consider 20% doing well. When your opponent gets 80%, you don't feel so great about it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I ran against the worst possible candidate. Corruption it was mind blowing. I spent the last 20 years living in Vietnam and Burma, Myanmar, and I've never seen corruption like this. It's crazy.
Well, you would expect in something that's overtly declared a democracy to see a little bit less corruption than those countries that don't even pretend to be democratic. And so I thought Erik would be a good participant in the show because of his now interest in national issues.
So I started following local politicians to keep on raising the property tax, and I see the quality of life going down. And I realized that they lied about everything. I mean, everything. So I said, I'm not going to replace them. I'm not going to complain about them. I'm going to replace them. But so I threw my hat into the arena, and now I'm running for Congress. But it is, they say like an honest politician is the most dangerous. And I don't think people are ready to really hear the truth about what's going on. I hope they are. This is why I do it. But it's disturbing how the media and the people just they don't get it, or as far as you don't see it in the results of the election. I wish better people, better than myself, would run for local politics, so I wouldn't have to.
Yeah, there's a lot of elitism in the media, no doubt. We're alternative free speech media. So thank you, Erik. Thank you, Marcy. Thank you, John. Before we get into today's topic, I want to add some context. Our current president, who was supposed to undo everything the previous president did, extended the previous president's COVID-era emergency powers on February 24, 2021, and now again through March 2022 with the extensions there in terms of mask mandates and vax mandates, both public sector and private sector. So the current president was supposed to undo what the previous president did and has in fact extended it by a year and a half. These emergency procurement rules, they will remain in place and will do so until at least March 2022 with the recent international travel restrictions, is what I mean to say. These emergency procurement rules and the simultaneous necessary central government production of COVID-19 medicines means that we are not able to distribute medicines worldwide to those that need them most because of coercive distribution at the nation state level rather than voluntary and mutual beneficial exchange locally. It is the national emergency powers which have allowed the state to basically nationalize medical provision. And I am sure that big pharma and other essential services along the supply chain are not too concerned. Thank you for participating in today's conversation. First, I want to mention that the USA Patriot Act itself was not reauthorized last year. So the Patriot Act itself has expired, but many of the tentacles remain. And in fact, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and the TSA and ICE and all of that, DHS was created with the Patriot Act, and of course those big behemoth national security agencies are with us. The minute you start having a homeland security, then that's a term that extreme right and left wing use a lot for power. So to quote Marcy, the Patriot Act is the perfect example of a government bureau is the nearest thing to eternal life we will ever see on this earth. Department of Homeland Security. Okay. The act itself has expired, but the police and invasion of privacy powers remain with us through today due to other legislation. In fact, most of the privacy and freedom of speech abuses we will be discussing today were in place prior to the Patriot Act. I want to remind people that the 9/11 hijackings were done using box cutters as a weapon. Box cutters weren't even illegal on flights at the time. The skillfully worded USA Patriot Act seems to me just a way for the nation state to create an image that we need central control to keep us safe, especially using the evergreen concept of national security. The Patriot Act made public and overt many things that were already happening. That was my opening salvo. Any comments on that? Marcy, John, Erik.
Sounds pretty good overview. I am aware of things that have been added to the Patriot Act, or apart from the Patriot Act, that are in keeping with its evil lineage here. But there was one or two significant victories. There was about 6 years ago a magnificent uprising by one man in the United States Senate named Rand Paul, who played a careful game of chess with his fellow senators in sounding like he was going to agree to an extension of Section 215 of the Patriot Act all the way to the last minute, and then suddenly pulled the rug from under them and filibustered the bill into that part of the bill into extension. So some part of the Patriot Act was removed by that act of courage.
And which was 215? What powers did that grant?
That granted a lot of powers to initiate investigation and keep everything secret. That if you could be sent one of those letters, special letters that tell you that you're under investigation, Patriot Act, you must disclose all this information to us. You can't talk about your activity or this investigation because that's classified. You can't even say you're under investigation because that's classified. You can't even say you had received such a letter from the government because that was classified, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and I should note that the legislation was amended to any investigations that the state was already doing, they could continue on even though the act expired. That's a broad net, right? It's just to keep more and more discretionary power. Erik, Marcy, what do you have to say about that stuff?
Yeah, well, I think your introduction, Cameron, was on spot, because that is the issue here, isn't it? In the sense that you have a crisis, you bring these acts, they're always called act, but all that flotsam and jetsam that the act produces doesn't go away. They say, oh, but that was an emergency. No, it doesn't, because that is the point of this thing, is to just leave all that behind. And this is how the power increases. This happens all the time. This is not the first time. You can either go back, you can easily go back to the time of Roosevelt. What happened there? You know, oh, he's dead now, right? All the thing changed, but Social Security is still here. Welfare is still here. All these things are here. They never go away.
Non-money convertibility.
Yeah, and so that's why I quoted Ronald Reagan, that he said that these things just don't go away. Once something is there, it's the closest thing to eternal life.
Erik, your initial reactions.
Yeah, I agree. I think the question is, why would politicians vote to give themselves less power?
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's the same with, why would senior incumbents who are politicians, why would they want a fairer, freer election? You know, they want to solidify power. So I think if we could answer that, and
we did kind of answer that and say that it's vanity and power.
Yes,
the vain want power and control and are our betters, I guess. Anyway, okay. So we know from we know from Anthony DeGisset that the state's goal is to grow its discretionary power. So I learned about Anthony DeGisset when I was working on my dissertation on state theory. And DeGisset was lived in Eastern Europe during the Iron Curtain period. And he went to you had to go to the bureaucrat to get a job, right? To get work. And hopefully that's not what we're turning into. But the bureaucrat told him, "You'll never work in this country." So he left that country and came to the West and studied political economy. So that's DeGisset, that the state exists to increase its discretionary power. A national emergency is the perfect cover for state power grabs. Although the U.S. Patriot Act expired, the administration has been given the vague discretionary right to continue to pursue any cases it had been working at the time of expiration. And we know from Robert Higgs and his ratchet effect that once the state has increased its power during a time of crisis, that this power may recede somewhat when the emergency is ended, but is ultimately increased, leading to a new higher level of state control. And Higgs covers a lot about the Roosevelt era here, especially when Roosevelt confiscated everyone's gold-based savings accounts in 1933, and then the Supreme Court declared that legal. And so we've had fiat money ever since. Right. Now we're going to discuss the specific instances of invasion of privacy that our guests and myself are concerned with. My personal concern is about the administration's idea to step up tracking of our financial transactions. We think that this began with the Patriot Act in 2001, when it really was the Orwellian named Bank Privacy Act of 1970. This act gives the US government the right to require those they regulate and bail out to report on transactions of $10,000 or more. The idea here is to prevent quote unquote money laundering. We can do a whole show on what money laundering is and why there is money laundering, but not now. The Patriot Act allowed this reporting for foreign transactions as well as domestic transactions. Domestic surveillance was already taking place before the Patriot Act. For this to be stepped up for smaller amounts, say as little as $600, would require a new act of Congress, something which is part of the Build Back Better legislation. These new powers sought include tracking our transactions on PayPal and Google Pay and Apple Pay. How tracking these minuscule amounts can help catch billionaires in tax evasion is beyond me. Comments?
I would like to say that that's one of the mechanisms, I should say, for how power continues to generate its own increase of its vortex. Because the crisis that leads to the legislation and regulations brought forth by such things as the Patriot Act lead to further institutionalization of the infrastructure of tyranny. When you add a law and you add a regulation and you add a policy based on the laws and regulations, there's all kinds of paperwork involved. You've got higher personnel, you have to hire enforcement agents, and eventually you build a larger government through one law or one major regulation. And then that law or that infrastructure is then duplicated by states that agree with that kind of procedure, and then they put together whatever they need or they think they need on the state and municipal level to match what the federal government already has gotten rolling.
Yeah, and the central government coordinates it all through tracking us.
It's kind of like the momentum of government. It snowballs and builds more government on its way down.
Exactly. So here, and this is a question for you all. So the Fourth Amendment against unreasonable searches and seizures, and I'm quoting the Constitution, and Fourth Amendment against unreasonable searches and seizures. So the Constitution itself is a flawed document because it gave Southern slaveholders 1.6 votes, and it allowed Northern industry protection against foreign competition. So, you know, there's a paradox of quoting a flawed document, rule of law, but I think we're more generally just concerned with the category of government power. So my question is, looking at our financial transactions, is that an unreasonable search and seizure?
Yeah, absolutely it is. In the sense that I did not give them permission. I didn't see a warrant for them to look at my property. And why is that any different than somebody knocking on my door and saying, oh, may I see your blah, blah, blah? You know, how is that different? But it seems to me that now that has been so normalized that I've been reading articles about it, but it's necessary. Well, but it's unconstitutional. You know, I mean, come on.
It's not specifically mentioned that something that the state can do. That's right. It's unconstitutional.
Yeah.
And yeah. Erik, what do you think? Well, I mentioned earlier the Treasury Department and the central bank bail out the commercial banks. They give them easy money and then they bail them out. So of course they're going to be acquiesce and give the state our personal private information because there's a beneficial relationship. They get bailed out.
Can I just, I had my turn, but I want to say one thing on that. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah, it's open discussion.
I agree with you on the bailout, they depend and so forth. However, the banks know that a lot of people were dependent on not being searched, small businesses, whatever. And so they were afraid that they would just bail out and just find other ways to park their money. And I believe the Bankers Association did push back. And I believe what happened is that Biden watered down what he initially proposed, for example. So I think the banks are not that happy either because of the customer base.
Yeah.
What do you think? I don't know. That's what I'm thinking.
Well, I read an interesting article today about how our commercial known bricks and mortar banks are all going to go away with cryptocurrency someday anyway, and about how the energy use of cryptocurrency is actually less than the banking sector and the hard currencies. So yeah, but Erik, what do you think about this? You're a small business owner. What do you think of this tracking minute financial transactions and all the paperwork involved? You're going to have to hire somebody new to report all this junk, right? Or what?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, I think that one of the main issues is, you know, how can you be anonymous and accountable at the same time? No, but it's not about holding people accountable. I think it's about control. But even what we saw, like with the Panama Papers and the Pandora, you know, they don't. These rules don't apply to the super wealthy, so they create these laws.
Yeah,
I think one of the most important issues with our community is we don't know who funds our community activists. I mean, I know, but they don't have to disclose where their funding comes from. But when people give it anonymously, you know, we don't know their reasons. And there, you know, there's an old saying: when a cat invites a mouse over to his house for dinner, the mouse should ask, "What's on the menu?" And when these wealthy billionaires give money to these nonprofit, fake progressive liberal organizations who are screaming tax to rich, we should ask, why are they doing this? And it's obvious about controlling the narrative.
Yeah, but tracking $600, how does that even touch the rich?
Yeah, but I'm saying that as far as these millions of dollars that they control, I mean, they bank in the Cayman Islands. The $600 is minuscule. It does nothing except just strengthen their control over small business.
Exactly.
leads to
Exactly.
totalitarianism.
Or corporatism, where large essential businesses are controlled. But believe it or not, we've already been talking for 25, 26 minutes. And we haven't even discussed Marcy Berry's question on indefinite detention. So when I invited Marcy on the show, she wanted to know, was indefinite detention still part of the game? And of course it is.
Of course it is.
Of course it is. So why don't we stop here and pick up with our second part of 20 years of the USA Patriot Act, and we'll talk about habeas corpus, indefinite detention, national emergencies, and abuse of power. So thank you, Marcy. Thank you, Erik. Thank you, John. Thank you for watching Hardfire Media Liberal Conversations on Brooklyn Free Speech Cable, also available on YouTube. We'll see you next time. Thank you. Hello, my name is Cameron Weber, and I approve of this message.